Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, June 21st, and I wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update related to the work that you've completed over the last week or so. I'm really amazed at everybody's ability to stick to it and really grow to learn and understand, and maybe some of you even love some of the material that we're reading, especially the articles you're reading for your literature review groups. I'm seeing lots of great and amazing articles come across in your Zotero. I've been looking through. I haven't made a lot of comments in Zotero yet, but I've been looking through some of your articles, and I think you're gathering a lot of really interesting material and items that will be of real concern to you as professionals. And that's part of the goal of this too, is for you to be able to critically examine the literature in your particular field. So I'm really thrilled that you're making a lot of progress on that. The module work is also, I think, going very, very well. I wanted to follow up a little bit on some of the different items that we've done over the past week or so. So the qualitative review, where all of you we did this jigsaw activity. You were all designed, given an opportunity to read one article and bring back your analysis to the group. And then the group was to read all the analyses and determine which article was strongest or weakest and why. And I think those discussions were very rich and provided a lot of opportunity. The groups that really finished out those conversations as robustly as possible, interestingly enough, virtually all the groups that finished out those discussions really agreed upon which article was the best of the group, or the most credible, I guess is a better way of putting it, and which article was the least credible. So most of the groups came up with, when they came to some consensus about it, they came up with the being on the hot spot, a phenomenological study of two beginning teachers' experiences enacting inquiry science pedagogy. Most felt that that was the most credible article. And it makes me happy to know that one of the authors is someone that I work with very closely here at Millersville. So Dr. Ali Drayon is one of the authors of that article. And I've always used it as an example of a good qualitative study, a well-organized qualitative study. That doesn't mean there weren't flaws. There's always flaws. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. There are always going to be flaws in your research. Even if you try to control every little thing when we're talking about human beings, it doesn't always happen. So that was the one that most of you felt was the best. The one that most of you felt was the weakest as far as credibility goes was the article called Positive Experiences as Input for Reflection. And a lot of you noted that the researchers' hands-off way of working through that research, having students work with one another and them not really being present, really didn't qualify as very good research. So I would agree with that. I think that was a good assertion by all of you. So that being said, you moved on to the analysis of the experimental articles, and wow, those discussions were awesome. I had very little to add, honestly. As I read through them and as people kept responding the way you were supposed to, you really did a nice job on those discussions. So I really thank you for all that effort that y'all put into that. You did a great job. And most of the comments that I had related to that were just that, like, great job. Those in the individual discussion boards as well, most of you are doing a great job. And so what I do is I just read those and I do an affirmation. Sometimes you get my thumbs up picture. I hope you like that. And then sometimes if there's something else I want you to think about, or if there's just a little nuance of something that you could think about a little bit differently, I try to point that out. So it's sort of the way that I've been trying to respond to all of the discussion posts that you've been doing. One thing that's important to remember, that a hallmark of experimental research, and this sort of leads into our work this week related to trying to tell the difference between what's experimental and what's some other type of quantitative research. And so the hallmark of experimental research, or quasi-experimental research, which is what most experimental research in education is called, really, if the researcher is able to manipulate anything within the study, then really you're talking about there's an experimental element to it, which is why we now have that term quasi-experimental. I know I was going back and forth with one or two of you related to those abstracts and how they could be perceived as one type of research or another type of research. So even if the author is manipulating just the sample, that can still be considered quasi-experimental research. I know Macmillan may or may not agree with me on that, and that's okay. That's kind of what's interesting about research, is that researchers do make their own path sometimes when it comes to utilizing terminology, which doesn't make it easy for folks learning about research methods, and it doesn't make it easy for folks who are trying to determine if credible is the right word to use for qualitative, or if validity has some place in talking about qualitative research, which it really doesn't, although there might be a researcher out there who says something different than that. So what we talk about in these different modules is really just what's the most common belief about some of the terminology and vocabulary, but you'll always find somebody who would disagree, I think. Now let's talk about the 4 abstracts. Those 4 abstracts, I'm going to try and share my screen here, so let's see how this goes. Okay, we're getting there. Let's see here. Let me share my screen. Then I'll share my entire screen, and then once I share that, I'm going to move over to the D2L site. Hopefully I'll be able to get that nicely. So hopefully you are seeing the discussion board with the abstracts on it. As you see, there are 4 choices, and you could have chosen any one of those, and there was a smattering of what folks chose. Choice 1 was experimental. And it was experimental because students were randomly assigned to receive different types of instruction. The researcher controlled that. Since the researcher controlled that, we would deem that to be experimental, or again, like I said earlier, in educational research, maybe quasi-experimental. Choice 2, that was kind of tricky, wasn't it? The word in there is relationship, right here. And what's interesting about that is that typically we use the word relationship to talk about correlation. But here, many of you picked up on the fact that it is not correlation, because we're simply comparing 3 different ways of experiencing a course. And we're trying to determine which of those, whether it be the traditional classroom, the blended, or the fully online, which of those promotes a stronger sense of community. So there's no, as one variable goes up, another variable goes up. It's because we don't have that ability to do correlation. We're just comparing the differences among the 3 different types of learning. So that would be a comparative study. Number 3, the Valenti study. Most of you who chose that one were easily able to determine that it was correlational. And choice 4 was also a little bit tricky, but again, most of you who tried to tackle that one picked up on the fact that it is an advanced form of correlation. So when we talk about regression analysis, we're still just doing correlation, but we're trying to correlate a bunch of different variables and find out which are most correlated all at once, instead of just trying to do 2 at a time. So that being said, I just wanted to review that, like I said I would in the D2L piece. I said that I would review those. The final thing that I want to talk about are the critical analysis papers. It's Tuesday afternoon. I have just started grading them. What I plan to do is, as I grade one, I'm going to release the grade, because honestly, what I'm doing for the most part is I'm looking at when you turned it in, and those who turned it in longest to go should get that feedback first. So that's the order in which I'm going to grade them and give you feedback through the D2L. I know I can already see that one of the ones that I've graded has already been accessed. So hopefully it's not difficult for you to figure out how to access the rubric that goes along with it that I've put comments on, and there's also the grade that will be listed there. So if you have any questions about that, remember I've got office hours tomorrow from 11:30 to 1:30, and I have office hours on Thursday as well. But of course, I'm always available through the help discussion board and through email. All in all, you're all doing a great job. You're very conscientious. You're trying your best. Sometimes there's some misconceptions, but you're very open to getting the feedback to correct those. And I'm very open to hearing from you about if you think I've made a mistake in grading, There's 30 of you. It's definitely possible. In trying to count all the different things that everybody's supposed to do and make sure I've, X'd off everything, absolutely there's a chance I could have made a mistake. So if you feel concerned about that, definitely contact me via phone or via email. Okay? Hey, thanks a lot. You're all doing a great job. Keep working hard, and I'll see you online tomorrow.